And we're going to talk more about health and wellness because there's a lot of wows that are going on there. And our guest tonight, well, she's going to amaze you because what she's doing at her company absolutely will blow your mind. So up next, we're going to be talking to the Senior Vice President of Axogen, and she's going to walk us through her world of innovation and leading in a medical technology company and all that they're up to, because it is Saturday night, and I'm thrilled to be with you because I'm Amilya on 77 WABC.
She's not here to change your mind, but she will get you to think for yourself. It's more of Amilya on 77 WABC.
It's another fantastic Saturday night. I am Amilya, and thank you so much for inviting me into your home. I am broadcasting live from the WABC studios here in New York City, and we're streaming live on iHeartRadio.com and Amilya.com worldwide. Well, let me just tell you, we've come a long way in health and wellness, and companies like Axogen are bringing solutions and choices to areas that there just wasn't any before. Axogen specializes in nerve damage, and not just repairing, but replacing nerves. Amazing, right? Well, my guest tonight, we have brought in Jill. Jill Schiaparelli is the Axogen Senior Vice President of Business Strategies and Marketing. She's been with the company since 2012, and she oversees not only the business strategies, but analytics, marketing, and patient-facing and customer care functions. Her passion is bringing technologies to the market to make a profound difference in the lives of patients. And she has more than 20 years of global business success in the medical device, biosurgery, and investing in banking industries. She has leadership roles in marketing and new product development and commercial strategies and analytics. And she's worked for major healthcare companies like Johnson & Johnson and Baxter's, as well as other high-growth companies, and now at the helm over here at Axogen. So, Jill, I want to welcome you to the show. I found all the information unbelievably fascinating of what you guys are doing.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about Axogen and about what we're doing with patients.
You know, it just seems like just a moment ago that, when, accidents happen, there just wasn't any choices. But some of the stories that I was reading up on your company, to me, is just amazing how far technology has actually come. You don't really think technology in the medical field, but however, you guys are just charging ahead. So can you give me an idea of some common things that cause nerve damage?
Absolutely. So peripheral nerves, which is what we're talking about here, are all over your body, from the top of your head to the tips of your toes. And each year, more than 1.4 million Americans will suffer from a nerve injury, and more than 900,000 of them will require surgical repair. And what a lot of people do not know is that it can happen with everyday things. Anyone can get a nerve injury, young, old, and it can happen in the home. It can happen when you are cutting a bagel in the morning. When you hold the bagel in your hand and the knife goes a little too far. Anytime you breach the skin, you have the potential to injure a nerve.
Which was so funny when I was just chit-chatting, and when I was reading up on the show like that, and I was just kind of talking to people around me, and I was going, talking about nerve damage, and they're like, well, I don't really have any nerves. I'm like, yes, we have nerves everywhere. And it is exactly what you said, a simple accident, and then poof, you're looking at, could be devastating consequences, just like exactly cutting a bagel. My son, when he was really young, accidentally cut himself, and it was severe. So these type of accidents what is it that you guys are doing, or what was it that because technology always takes such a long time. What was your goal?
Well, the options for repair. So nerves do something really special. Peripheral nerves, they regenerate themselves, meaning that when they're injured, your body is very smart, and when the nerve is cut, the nerve that's kind of closest to the center of the body will grow out. So for example, if you have an injury in your hand, the nerve will grow towards the fingers. But when there's a large gap in that tissue, you need to bridge it with something. In other words, it won't reach the other side on its own. And for years, what doctors did is they took something called a nerve autograft, meaning they took healthy nerve tissue from somewhere else in the patient's body, most often an area behind the ankle, a nerve called the sural nerve. And that was really the perfect replacement because you were using human nerve to replace damaged human nerve. Unfortunately, that does require the patient undergoes a second surgical site, and obviously that healthy nerve was doing something important, otherwise it wouldn't have been there. So frequently a patient where that nerve is harvested from may experience something minor like numbness or tingling.
Right. So now you went from having one injury to now actually two.
That's right. And that a lot of people don't like that. So the holy grail was to say, could we get human tissue that wouldn't have a risk of rejection? And for years, scientists tried to figure out how to do that. And what they tried to do is take the cells out, but it was very technically complex. And Axogen is quite blessed to have put together two different pieces of technology that allow us to recover nerves from deceased donors. So this is all part of the gift of life of tissue donation.
Right.
We then process it using a proprietary process, and it takes all the cells out, and it leaves behind the structure, the scaffold, and the body recognizes that as human tissue. It fills the gap, again, human tissue being repaired with human tissue, and it's an off-the-shelf product. And that's what gives the advantage here.
Which is crazy that it's an off-the-shelf product. Well, I mean,
and the other important thing to remember too is if you have a very severe injury, we talked about a bagel cut, but if you've had a very severe injury, a car accident, you accidentally put your hand in a lawnmower, things that just happen, you may need a lot of tissue, and the reality is you may not be able to get that from your own body. So this gives you the advantage of unlimited quantity.
Yeah, as a kid growing up, my uncle was a factory worker, and his hand slipped underneath the machinery, and he lost 3 of his fingers. There was no option. That's what it is. You just have to amputate them, right? And so it's fascinating, right, that there's somebody out there who spends their time thinking about, well, all I need to do is just kind of bridge this gap, and I'm going to take this and invent that. As my entrepreneurial mind was just going crazy, and I was looking at all of the information, and there was mention in there about something that you guys are doing specifically about wounded veterans. Can you tell me about that?
Yes, actually. Our product came to market several years ago, and one of the big problems with a lot of the recent conflicts we've had are the types of injuries we're seeing. More and more soldiers are surviving, but because of IEDs, they're coming back with a lot of damage to their lower limbs. In that case, they didn't even have any nerve that could be recovered if they had an injury in their arm. But we have heard several patient stories where military members had been brought into major institutions such as Walter Reed. And when they had a major injury to a nerve in their leg, for example, the sciatic nerve, I know many of your listeners are familiar with that.
Yeah. Any of us who've been pregnant, we know that nerve.
Yeah. But in any event, that's a very, very large diameter nerve. Where it enters your body, it can be as wide as the size of a nickel, for example. Very difficult to repair, and the standard of care when there was a major injury to that nerve was to amputate the leg.
Right.
We do have some patients that we've featured and have had the privilege of getting to know that have actually received our product instead of having their leg amputated, and they're now able to walk on their own 2 legs.
Which has got to be, I mean, as somebody who's, at the, the high level that you are as a VP, it's got to give you such energy to come to work every day when you read a story about something like that. Somebody who's dedicated their lives to this country, came back, would have had a completely different kind of life. And because of your product is now, moving forward, living a healthy life.
Axogen has delivered fantastic business results because we have a good technology, but the most important thing we do is helping patients with nerve injuries regain quality of life. And you use the word passion. I bring such passion to this. I'm covered in goosebumps right now thinking of the patients that I've had the honor to meet who have had our products. But that passion is throughout the entire company. Every single person at the company is there because we want to make a difference in patients' lives. And nerve repair technology is sort of like the greatest story never heard. And if I could impress one thing on you and your listeners is there are nerve injuries everywhere, and a lot of people don't realize it. And it's so important that they get to a doctor where they can be diagnosed and then discuss and know that they have treatment options. Make sure you've done your research and don't just, accept perhaps the first thing that's offered. Have a dialogue with your surgeon about what treatment is truly right for you and your lifestyle.
And I think that's what's so difficult because we don't think about our ailments as even having a possibility of a nerve damage, right? I mean, it's something that's not in our realm of thinking. So I don't think a lot of people would even ask the question to their doctor, could this possibly be, some type of nerve damage?
Well, that's exactly right. And maybe if you're brought into the emergency room and you see have a broken bone or broken skin, the attention gets placed on that, and the nerve injury may not appear for some time, but if you're continuing to have numbness or complete loss of sensation or lack of mobility, there's a good chance you've had a nerve injury and you owe it to yourself to get properly evaluated.
That's awesome. So just hang on just 1 second, because we're going to be back and taking a closer look at this. Wow. We talk about the innovation that is happening in the medical world with our guest expert, Jill Schiaparelli. We'll be right back, because this dance is going to continue, because it's Saturday night, and I'm Amilya on 77 WABC.
Agree or disagree? Lover or hater? You'll never be indifferent about Amilya. Now back to the show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back. I'm Amilya, and I'm broadcasting live from the WABC studios here in New York City, and I'm streaming live on iHeartRadio.com and Amilya.com worldwide. Well, our guest today, we're talking about nerve damage. I know what you guys are thinking about. The nerve damage, no, that doesn't happen to me, but it happens to millions of people, and it's always that freak of an accident. Well, there's companies like Jill Schiaparelli, who is the Senior VP of Axogen, who are taking leapfrogs jumps in the medical community to be able to bring solutions and options to people that just didn't have them before. So we were talking a little bit about the program that you were working with the wounded veterans, and something also called Gift of Life. And just before we close for break, we're talking about the fact that so often people are suffering for something, and we don't think that the possibility could be a nerve damage. So before the break, you were talking about, ask your doctor when, and you were talking about, like, if you have numbness. Can you go back over that one more time? If people feel what, could it be associated with a nerve?
Sure. Well, remember, nerves are like the wires of your body, and they send signals back and forth to the brain about, what your fingers are feeling, or move my leg. And typically, if those nerves are damaged, it distorts the signal. And usually the symptoms can be anything from numbness, like that feeling you have when you've slept on your arm at night and you wake up in the morning and it's all tingly and numb,
yes,
except that you have it all the time. Or you have a complete lack of sensation. Imagine running your finger over something cold or hot and not knowing what the temperature is. Or you're not able to move your hand. You're not able to move your fingers, your arm, your leg, what have you. Or pain. And pain is one of those things that it can be caused by a lot of different things. But if you believe you've had some injury and then you have it followed by pain, it's important that you rule out a nerve injury.
Got it. So it's when you have that, your body should be doing X and it's doing something different. The little messenger's not working.
That's right. And not only does it happen by sort of trauma that we talked about, but patients also undergo many common surgical procedures in which the nerves are cut, sometimes intentionally and sometimes accidentally. Every year, 10 million young people undergo wisdom tooth removal. I bet many of your listeners have had their wisdom teeth removed. A small percentage of those will result in an injury to the nerve in the lower jaw, what's referred to as the trigeminal nerve. And what will happen is they'll wake up after the procedure and they'll realize they still feel like they're numb, like when you go to the dentist and you've had Novocaine. Maybe their tongue has no sensation, the inside of their mouth or their lips. It does depend where the nerve has been cut. And what those patients need to understand is if that persists for some time, they need to get that nerve evaluated. Now, sometimes it may have been slightly cut and will heal on its own, but if it's been completely severed, there's a good chance they'll need a surgical intervention. And it needs to happen sooner rather than later, because while nerves will regenerate, after a while the outcome will be poorer.
Right, and you mentioned the word dental, right? So we all cringe, like, because the amount of people who do not like to go to the dentist is just immense, right? I mean, I have to take my kids kicking and screaming, but absolutely, there's so much that goes on in the mouth. With nerves. I mean, I just myself, I had a root canal, and like all my teeth on the other side don't feel right ever again. I'm like, okay, that was awful. Now I can't chew. But this seems to be happening more and more. It's common. But there was something that I was reading about that you actually have dentists that actually, I guess, use your product. Is that correct?
Oh, well, they're actually specially trained oral maxillofacial surgeons. That's who would do this. And it's a very select group of oral maxillofacial surgeons But yes, they are currently today using our product in patients all around the country.
Which is like, again, I mean, so many people, they go and they have a horrible experience with the dentist, and our first reaction is, well, I just won't go back. And you're saying if you are still suffering after visiting the dentist, that maybe a specialized dentist is somebody we need to see.
Right. And a lot of times the advice is given, just wait it out, the nerve will repair itself. And that is often the correct information, but if you truly have a severed nerve, waiting is exactly the wrong thing to do. A lot of the oral maxillofacial surgeons who do this say it's really important that patients with an injured trigeminal nerve get to a specialist within 3 months after the injury. After that, the likelihood of a successful outcome diminishes significantly.
Wow, that's definitely important information. So don't wait.
Don't wait.
Don't wait. Yeah, and that is a common response. It'll just get better, which is always mean they don't know.
That's exactly right. And I think, in a lot of cases, the diagnostics are not always keeping up with the technology. So they are right to say many times it will heal on its own, but many times it won't. So better safe than sorry. Go and get a proper evaluation.
So what's on the horizon? What are you guys, cooking up over there now? What do you see in the future for Axogen?
Well, Axogen is really special, as I mentioned, because all we do is nerve repair. So we spend a lot of time thinking about the market. And one of the things that we've identified in that market is that there are a lot of different types of nerve injury. So we talked about when you need to bridge the nerve injury where you have a gap, but there's other cases where you have a compression of the nerve, and that typically does cause pain. I'm sure many of your listeners are familiar with carpal tunnel issues. Well, many times, about 20% of those carpal tunnel issues need to be repaired again, what we call a revision procedure. And in that case, what we need to do is we need to put some sort of protection around the nerve, because typically that pain is being caused by something pressing on the nerve, and frequently it's some sort of soft tissue in the area. And when the problem recurs and you have to repeat the operation, you want to take a step of protecting the nerve. So we actually have added a product to our portfolio called the Axogen Nerve Protector, and that's designed specifically for protecting nerves and kind of insulating them from the other things going on in the area so that there's nothing pressing on them.
And that sounds so, I mean, again, because there's so many people, especially since we live in front of our computers and doing repetitive work there's so many people who suffer from carpal tunnel. But that's the first time I've ever even heard of that. So is it like the message is not getting out to the doctors in the community? I mean, are people going to need to be more proactive on what the solutions are for things like carpal tunnel?
Well, I think the key is that the patient needs to get to a specialist. There are there's no one out there that hangs a shingle that says nerve surgery, but nerve surgeons are usually orthopedic or plastic surgeons who have completed a fellowship in hand or extremity surgery, and they typically they will typically do these types of more advanced procedures. Similarly, in the oral maxillofacial space, I mentioned these are the surgeons that have done an additional fellowship where they're microsurgically trained and have the capability to address these nerves. So I think the important thing is to get to the right type of clinician.
So I have to ask you, what's your favorite story? I mean, you've changed the lives of so many. What's the story that you carry with you that motivates you every day to kind of keep bringing innovation into the medical community?
Oh, that's not a fair question, because I you know what, I'm so passionate about this. But one thing that I will share is our big current news is that one of our nerve tissue recipients, a terrific woman named Shirley from the Chicago area, is about to be honored on the upcoming Donate Life float in the Rose Parade.
Oh, wow!
And what that is it's a float that honors what's called the gift of life, the gift of tissue, eye, and organ donation. And so she'll be one of 30 tissue, eye, and organ recipients riding on that float. She's representing all nerve tissue recipients. And again, nerve tissue is newly added to the list of tissues that are being donated and then transplanted in people. And Shirley had a really interesting story. She survived polio as a child, but underwent about some 13 or 14 different procedures on her leg to correct some of the orthopedic issues. And obviously during those procedures, the nerves in her leg were injured. And as she aged, she started to experience a great deal of debilitating pain in her leg, and she went to doctor after doctor after doctor seeking any relief from this unbelievable, intractable pain. And she even had one doctor who recommended amputating 3 of her toes, which she did in an effort to relieve the pain. But it wasn't until she met a doctor in Chicago who was able to do a proper assessment of the nerves in her leg. And he identified 3 areas of what's called neuroma, which means there's been an injury and it hasn't healed properly, and that's what was causing the pain. And they cut out the neuroma, which is a standard way of repairing it, and then they laid in our advanced nerve graft, our human nerve allograft tissue. And that has been regenerating. Her procedure was about a year ago, and she has experienced a major reduction in pain. She's still undergoing physical therapy while the nerves regenerate, but she's going to be honored on that, and she's become a great spokesperson for Gifts of Life.
That's awesome. Well, so Jill, I want to thank you so much for being with us tonight. Jill is the Senior VP of a company called Axogen, and if you'd like to get more information on the company, visit them at AXogenInc.com, or you can find them on the NASDAQ under AXGN. AXGN. Jill, thank you so much. Great information. We'll post it again on our website, and just a beautiful story. And we're going to definitely look for her in the Rose Parade. And up next, I'm going to be answering your questions because it's going to be time to get social, because I'm Amilya on 77 WABC.
She's not here to change your mind, but she will get you to think for yourself. It's more of Amilya on 77 WABC.